Brian Scudamore, welcome to the EO 360 podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thrilled to be here.
Now, you're joining me for Paris? Where are you right now?
I am. I'm working a little bit remotely for an adventure with my family right now. So I'm in Paris. Quite a different time change from where you're at, but it makes it a little challenging with my team. But I'm enjoying life, and after 36 years of building three businesses, it's nice to have a bit of a hey, let's take an adventure as a family. While I've still got one in high school, and now he's going to high school in Paris.
No, but typically it's Vancouver where you live, where your family
Yeah,
lives.
Vancouver's my home, head office. We've got an office in Toronto as well. And I was born in the United States in San Francisco, moved to Canada when I was 8 years old. My mother remarried, and Canada's always been home ever since.
All right, Brian, for those that are listening to this and do not know the name, well, they're probably not in EO because anyone in EO knows who Brian Scudamore is. Brian's the founder and CEO of 1-800 Got Junk, which, Brian, I think if I'm not mistaken, you started when you were 19. Is that right?
Yeah, technically 18, so just before my 19th birthday.
Let's go with
And
18 then, man.
yeah, right. Why not?
18 years old. You've grown this to almost a billion. Are you over a billion in revenue now?
We are getting there. We're about 700 million with 1-800 Got Junk. And then we've got two other home service brands, Wow One Day Painting, where we paint people's homes in a day. And we've also franchised Shack Shine, where we do windows, gutters, power washing, and Christmas lights. It's a house detailing business.
And this is all part of OTE brands, OTE standing for ordinary to exceptional. Those are the three brands under OTE.
Yeah, O2E isn't necessarily a brand that people know as much, but we like to, it's a holding company, and we gave it that name, ordinary to exceptional, because that's what we do. Very ordinary home service businesses that we've taken and we said we will make exceptional through the quality of people and systems and vision that we bring to our businesses.
Beautiful. You are author of a couple books. I say a couple, but I mean two books, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Two books, yeah.
One was called WTF.
Willing to fail.
Thank you. I had
Exactly.
to look up what exactly that stood for because that's not what popped in my head. The other was BYOB, which I like what you did there.
Yeah.
Build your own business, be your own boss.
Be your own boss. Exactly.
All right.
We love acronyms. It makes it simple. And they're both very readable books that I think both call out the power of EO and networking and how that's been a network or a tribe for me. I honestly, you and I talked pre-podcast for a couple of minutes, and I said to you, I wouldn't be even 10% of what I am today as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a size of business we built if it wasn't for EO. And you said,
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think, and I believe you believe that. I mean that, Dick. I do not think you're just being a politician here. I do not believe that to be true. I think somebody like Brian Scudamore, and there's many other people. Like I'm not putting you in this class of one. Like I think there's a lot of people out there, many of whom I've interviewed in this podcast, that regardless of the resources they're given, they're going to find a way. And I think you fall in that category. Now, I do believe you're utterly grateful for EO. That I buy.
I am grateful, and here's why I might respectfully disagree with you. Why I don't just believe it, I think it's really true, is it is a network that has brought like-minded, ADD, very disfocused at times entrepreneurs and brought us together and said, we've got such a passion to want to succeed, but also to help each other. And there's a bond that's formed instantly from EO. So I moved to Paris for a year. I joined EO in Paris. I 5 years ago decided to start to learn to speak French. And there I am showing up in French, bumbling through my EO meetings, but everybody's there because they want to give, they want to help. And it was Vern Harnish, who is a mentor and friend, and of course, one of the founders of EO, who said to me, when you join this organization, you get what you give. And EO isn't just something you show up and take from, but you give your heart and soul and your advice and wisdom and share all your failures and whatever it might be. And I've always taken that to heart in the way I've shown up. And as a result, I get so much more than I could ever imagine from the organization, not just friends, but problems I've had, every problem I've ever had, in fact, in my business, someone in EO has helped me solve it much more quickly than fumbling around on my own to try and find answers.
I've heard the phrase that EO is a gym, not a spa. Have you heard that? I don't know
Mm,
if that's a regional thing or
I have not heard that,
yeah, I
but
mean,
you
of
immediately
course.
heard me go, yeah, like it resonates. That tracks. It's something you've got to put time and energy into, not just go and go, "Oh, I got my fill of EO, I got my spa." No, it's a gym. You show up. And there's forum meetings that we show up to sometimes where you're like, ah, that was lame. Someone
Yeah, that's
complained
the
all
worst.
forum meeting, but you had to be there for them and they needed you, and that was okay. Don't expect everything to always come back in spades.
Now, Vern Harnish, you mentioned a few minutes ago, he did something very
Mhm.
similar where he moved to, I think it was Barcelona with his family
Correct.
for a
For a
year
bunch
or
of
two
years.
or something like
That
that.
was a bunch of years. Yeah. I think his kids grew up there.
Was that the inspiration for you moving, or was it totally unrelated? I mean, was
No, my
part of the
my family, we seem to have grown up with a love for all things French, the wine, the people, the culture. My wife's in the fashion business, and we've spent a lot of time in France. And we just decided, well, we've got two kids in university. Let's take our youngest and go on an adventure. When I was a kid, when I was my son's age, I lived in England for a year. My dad's a liver transplant surgeon, and he was studying in Cambridge. We moved away, and it had a big impact on me. And so I think it's great if my son can have that same experience.
Yeah, yeah, any resistance from a high school kid leaving his friends and going to another country?
I think the only resistance is going to be in going back. He's having the time of his life.
That's that's great. That's amazing. So you're a TV personality, you're a podcaster and a podcastee, of course. In fact, I know this is silly after having been on Oprah and 20 years on your own show, but I was super impressed. You were on How I Built This with Guy Raz. I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool.
That's the big time. I mean, Guy is a friend, and I've gotten to know him since that interview years ago, and I was one of the early How I Built This participants,
Yeah.
and he is, I mean, with all due respect to every podcaster in the world, he is really up there on top. Like, the guy knows how to tell stories and pull gems out of every single person. I believe he believes that everyone has a story worth telling, and he somehow finds it,
So
and he's brilliant.
he's doing that the advice line. Have you seen that?
I've done that with him as well.
You have. I haven't heard that one. But my son, I'm very proud to say that my son is on the advice line. So is it the shirt I'm
That's so
wearing
cool.
today? He has this Hawaiian flannel shirt company called
Oh my gosh, I love it.
it. And so anyway, so he's been doing great. He's full time on this thing. He's got a few 100,000 in revenue at this point, and
Mm,
he's making a thing of it. And anyway, he applied to be on How I Built This advice line, and he got on.
mm.
So I'm very proud of
It
that kid.
it's very much like a Dragon's Den, Shark Tank type show where you're getting real-time advice, and I had 3 different entrepreneurs show up and ask for my opinion, and it's just an opinion, but it was like, "Wow, this is a really fun show." So, guys taking it next level.
So listen, I know you've gone through this 1,000 times, and
Mm,
I appreciate it. I hope it's not getting old for you to keep telling your story, but I would love to hear your story from being this kid that struggled to learn back in the 80s. You and I were born the same year, and I think you and I had similar um academic experiences where it
mm,
was for me, it was difficult to pay attention
yeah.
in school. Now, I don't know if I was ever diagnosed when in the '80s, ADD wasn't really,
Wasn't a
diagnosed
thing.
the way it is today. I
Mm,
remember the phrase being ADHD, and it was very, very extreme cases at that time that were diagnosed.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
if you don't mind, take me through the story, and don't hold back. Take me through the story.
Yeah.
Anything you wanna share. I've got some points that I'm gonna bring up if I don't hear them from you. And then,
Mm,
for the amount of time we have left, I've got about 1,000 questions I wanna dig into. But let's start with the story. What was your
I'll
childhood?
frame
Start there.
yeah, I'll frame my story. So I grew up in San Francisco for the first bunch of years of my life and went to a couple of different schools and was just not a good kid. Was getting kicked out at a young age just for
Wait, you
horsing
said you were
around.
not a good kid, so you were getting kicked out. You were disruptive. You were what? Breaking the
I was
law.
disruptive, not in the way that entrepreneurs are proud. I was just making jokes, running around the classroom, trying to get attention, and I couldn't sit
Yeah.
still. And it drove my teachers nuts. It drove my parents nuts on days when I would get expelled. And it was a challenge. I actually looked back at my report cards recently, and that was one of the words that stood out as what a disruptive person Brian is. Now, I don't think that people thought I was a terrible person, but I wasn't conforming to the rules and standards in school. And I couldn't sit still. And we see that today with people. But like you said, it can often be overdiagnosed today. I mean, we've all got ADD after having an iPhone, right?
Why?
But I grew up in,
Why would you go back to your report cards? Why like, what
I,
inspired you to pull out your report
yeah,
cards? From
as someone who's in the junk.
especially when they represent a period of your life, I think, where like, I don't know, I think back in that time, and it's I'm not proud of my academic, uh,
Mm,
journey. You know, so, like,
mm.
I wouldn't wanna pull out my report cards, look at the comments. So what inspired you to do that?
I've got the comments on my phone. It's funny. I took photos of a lot of these comments and I realized first of all, I'm a minimalist. I don't collect a bunch of stuff, especially as someone who's ADD. I just don't like stuff. I know I'm in the junk removal business. It has nothing to do with that. It's just I don't like clutter, and a cluttered desk is a cluttered mind. But one thing I've kept throughout my life is all my report cards being a kid. And I one day decided to take photos of them, and I was reading them to some friends, and they're like, "Wow, that's mean. That's hurtful." And I'm like, I don't see it that way. I saw it as an opportunity of to look back and say, look how far I've come, because I found some teachers along the way, like Mr. Dods, my third grade teacher, who believed in me and saw something that others didn't. And that reminded me of the importance as a leader in building my own businesses to see things in other people that they might not be aware of, to see potential, to see possibility. And so these report cards became an inspiration to me of, let's not talk about all the failures that people make. Let's talk about all the opportunities of learning that can come from some of the challenges people have and how they do things differently. And again, I go back to Mr. Dodds, who said, Brian's got all this amazing energy. He's just got to learn how to harness it, right? How to put it to good use. And I was inspired by him, and I did. While I'm somebody, so you asked me to tell my story. I went to 14 schools from kindergarten through till college. I didn't graduate from high school, and I didn't graduate from college. I moved around a lot because of my parents, my dad learning to do liver transplants, but I also moved schools involuntarily because I didn't fit in. So 14 schools, I only graduate kindergarten. Now, while I dropped out of high school, talked my way into college to ultimately drop out of college and build my business full time, I didn't drop out of learning. I just dropped out of school and a system that didn't work for me. As someone with ADHD, I needed to find a way to learn on my own terms. And that became asking people questions, meeting with other entrepreneurs, knocking on doors, picking up the phone, and just asking for people's advice and opinion on ideas I had. And the learning I got was worth so much more than a classroom education to me. The learning I got from sitting down and actually starting a business, the Rubbish Boys, which ultimately became after university, became 1-800 Got Junk. I learned way more about business running a business versus learning from a textbook or from a marketing professor who had never marketed a business in his entire life. And so I realized one day when I was in university with a year left, not enjoying my life in school, and I sat down with my dad, who's a liver transplant surgeon, as I mentioned, and I said, Dad, I can't do this. I'm leaving school. And he said, Bri, you got a year left. Just finish one more year.
I would have said the
And
same.
I just saw exactly, I think we all would as parents, but I saw the writing on the wall. School was always going to be there if I wanted to finish, but my business opportunity might not be. I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. while I'm excited about this potential future of building and growing a business. And I went all in and I had something to prove to my dad. And the first day dropping out, I think I went out and bought a second truck. And then I started to grow my fleet and my people. And probably took my dad 15 years before he literally said, "Hey, Brian, I'm proud of what you've done." And that's okay. Um, but it was one of those things where I had to make some decisions to take my own future into my own hands and say, I'm going to have some more fun here and learning doing it my way.
So let's before you go on, let's drill down into that for a minute. So a
Of
little more
course.
detail, and I'm just gonna fill in some of the blanks here.
Mhm.
I mean, the story goes you were. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the story goes you were in a McDonald's drive-through. You see this truck,
Mhm.
Mark's hauling or something.
Mark's Holland. Yeah.
Um, and uh, and you were running out of money to pay for school. And you're like,
Mm.
"I gotta do something that looks
Mm.
interesting," right? So,
Yeah.
you went out and bought a truck for $700 and you started the Rubbish Boys.
Yeah. So there I was, one course short of graduation from high school. I managed to talk my way into college for the next year, but I had
How
to
did
find
you
a way to pay for it.
who did you talk to? Like, how do you talk you didn't have a diploma from high school. I mean, I just from raising 3 boys, eh, I hardly got into a college. Like, how do you get into college without a high school degree?
That's what entrepreneurs do. We know how to sell. So I
That's
literally, I'm
really
like,
good.
okay, who lets you into college? The admissions office. So I went and met several times with the admissions office, and my pitch was, I'm smart enough. I can do this. I don't need a high school education to prove that I'm smart enough. Give me an assessment test, whatever it is, but just I want a chance here. I know I can do this. And they found some loophole to let me in as what they called a mature student. If you were over 18 and you didn't have a high school diploma, you could apply to become a mature student. Okay,
Yeah.
sound immature to me at 18.
I don't think I would have passed the mature test at 18, but
Exactly.
kudos to you, Brian.
And they gave me a chance and they let me in. And so there I talked my way into college. All my friends are going, and I just felt like I was missing out. But then I had to find the money to pay for it. My parents weren't going to give me any money or lend me money because I didn't finish high school. It's not, that's the rules. And so I started this business. And there I was in a McDonald's drive-through, beat up old pickup truck in front of me while I'm waiting for my cheeseburger. And it said Mark's Hauling on the side. It's filled with junk. I look at the truck and I'm like, that's what I need to do. Buy my own truck. And so I go into the classified ads, $700. And a week later, I had a truck and a business, the Rubbish Boys. And then I started driving down alleys and laneways in that truck and hauling away junk for a fee. And that basic business model is still what we do today. People call us because they call 1-800 Got Junk. We don't have to drive down alleys and laneways. But the business model today is very similar to the day I started back in 1989.
What did your surgeon dad say when you said, "Hey, I'm gonna haul junk to pay for school"?
I thought it was brilliant. I
Yeah.
thought it was a great idea because school was still there. School was part of the equation. Now, when I took school out of the equation and said, Dad, have a seat, I got some good news for you. As an entrepreneur, I've also learned to sell tough news in a way that's positive. I got good news. Oh, okay. That intrigued him. He sits down and, what's the news? And I said, well, I'm quitting school. And he said, what? How is that good news? My oldest son is quitting college to become a full time junk man. Like, I don't get it. And that's where I had to sell him on the idea that dad, school will always be there. I promise if I want to go back to the University of British Columbia in Vancouver one day, I can. And, but I won't, not today. And, on that day, I just said, I'm done. I wasn't enjoying it at all. And I wasn't learning. And so I learned on my own terms, and that's made all the difference.
What role did your mom play in this?
Yeah, great question. My mom gets upset sometimes when she says, all you do is talk about your father and talk about his, getting mad at you.
Not today,
She,
Brian. Talk about your
thank
mother.
you. Thank you, Dave. Mom, you know what? I love my mom. So she played a role of, she was a real estate agent. She understood what it was like to do sales and won a bunch of awards and did great. Um, I came from a family, her parents, my grandparents were from San Francisco and they had a family store, an army surplus store. I used to work there every Christmas, every summer holiday. And I loved learning about business and just playing the game of ringing the cash register and making some sales. And so my mom always has been an encourager of mine. And I think while my dad thought I was making a mistake, my mom was patient with it and kind. And she didn't take his perspective of, you have to go back. She's like, okay, let's see what happens. And I think she was open to the possibility. And that made a big impact on me. I needed the balance between mom and dad.
And that's why you have
And
daddy issues and not mommy issues. You gotta prove to your
exactly.
dad that you can do it, and that's what makes Brian, build a billion-dollar company.
There you go.
So, you go on about, what, 7 or 8 years as the Rubbish
Mhm.
Boys. How
Mhm.
how how big did you get the Rubbish Boys over the course of those 7 or 8 years? Now, and bear in mind, if I'm not mistaken, that includes the 2 or 3 years that you were in school. How many years were
Mhm.
you in school before you dropped out?
Yeah, about 3 years.
3 years, okay. So
Yeah.
you're running this part-time, well, as a student, then you drop out, you decide to go full-time, you run it for another 5 years or so before you rebrand as 1-800 Got Junk.
Mhm.
Tell me about that window of time.
Yeah, I built it to $100,000 business while I was still in university. But once went full time and all in, then I grew it to an $800,000 business. And that was my close to getting to the number where I was ready to join EO. At the time, you had to have $1 million in revenue, $1 million in Canadian, where I was based was the number. And I remember showing up to a potential EO interview and a forum and a group of people interviewed me and said, okay, guys, I love this. I'm all in. And I said, but I'm only at $797,000 in revenue this year, not at the threshold. And they said, someone pulled me aside and said, we really love good people. And we think your number's close enough. We'd be willing to make an exception.
We
I
think
think this might have been before the days before they audited and actually got letters from your accountant and so on. So I squeezed in, but I was so glad that I was able to get in
what year was
just a
that?
little bit early. That would have been 1996.
96, so that was just, like, t if I'm not I think Vern and the gang started that back in '94, is that right, or was it earlier?
I think it was the late 80s,
Okay, alright.
I believe. Yeah.
So, but this
It was
facility.
definitely the late 80s because I met Vern in Toronto in 1994 when he spoke to ACE, which was the Association for Collegiate Entrepreneurs. And I think they'd started it in like 86 or something. It had been going fairly strong up until that time.
So and so you 100 grand in college, um, but you had another 5 years or so after that. What happened in those 5 years?
Yeah, so I grew it up to almost a million, joined EO,
Yeah.
and then things started to accelerate. But what was interesting when I hit half a million in revenue, 5 years into the business in total, I realized I'm a leader, but I'm not a leader. Nobody's taught me how to be one. I didn't know what I was doing. I was figuring it out on the job. I had 11 employees and 5 trucks. And there was a day that hit me where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not having fun. I'm hiding in my private office. We don't have private offices today, but we did back then. And I was hiding from my team because I didn't like them. They didn't like me. I didn't find the right people. And I just thought, oh, this is a disaster. So I brought everyone in for a morning meeting and I started with 2 words. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't give you the love and support that you needed to be successful. I might not have found the right people. You certainly haven't found the right leader, and we're going to part ways. And I learned that day that a company is all about people, find the right people and treat them right. I had a lot of growing up to do and a lot of learning to do. So this was on me. But once I figured that out, I started hiring people who saw this as not just a job, but saw some meaning behind it, wanted to make sure customers were happy and put a smile on their face. And they saw some possibilities that I saw. And when I changed my perspective and mentality towards who and how I hired people, that made a big difference in my life. And we win awards today for best company in America and Canada, and it's because we understand that it's about a connection to how we treat our people and finding the right people. So I learned a tough lessons that day. That was a big failure. You mentioned my book, WTF Willing to Fail. That was the real first WTF moment. But man, we made it through.
I think it was Newsweek's top 100 most loved workplaces that you most recently won, and the only Canadian company to do so too, from what I
Correct.
understand. So, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just going back a second, you had 11 people, I
Mm.
think you said 5 trucks?
5 trucks.
And $500,000 in revenue. That's tight.
Mhm,
That's a tight
mhm.
business, 100 grand per truck and 11
Correct.
people. Um who did you and then you who did you brought in all 11? Like, you got rid of
All 11. The expression "one bad apple spoils the whole bunch." I had probably 9 bad apples, and then 2 I was unsure of.
oh my
And
gosh,
I'm
you
like,
brought
"You know what?
everybody in and you're just like, "We're done." You
Everybody."
started
Yeah,
from
one
scratch.
one fell swoop, I fired every single person, myself in a group setting, which looking back was felt dangerous. I didn't know if I was gonna make it out of my own office, but it's interesting. I think people appreciated my ownership of it and my apology to them that, I'm sorry that I made this mistake. And it was a long time ago, so I've probably got some selective memory of how hard it might have been, but I really did learn. I really learned that we're going to build a culture here and have fun. I mean, I didn't know the word culture back then. I didn't intentionally go, okay, today's a new day and we're going to get it right. But I started to learn very quickly what made a great business and a great vibe and an impactful profitable business related to the people you hire. And I made changes in how I recruited and how I led and treated those people.
It's funny you said I didn't know the word, culture back then. You're right. The word culture didn't really my memory is it was around the Silicon Valley era where the
Mm,
word culture became a thing and everybody's, riding scooters around the office, and, like,
accepting.
that kinda became representative of culture, and then, of course, people come out and it's like, "Well, that's scooters don't equal culture," and then it became
Mhm,
a thing in, like, the early 2000s, mid-2000s. Uh,
mhm.
that was fun, that was a fun topic, and now it's kinda seen as a little squishy, and people just that's my interpretation of the evolution of culture. But, I mean, it's a big
Yeah.
deal for obviously, for a company like yours that's in the most loved workplaces, obviously, culture plays a big deal there. Tell me
Yeah, and culture to me, you've got to have performance, in my opinion. You've got to have performance along with that culture. You can't just have a ping pong table and a beer fridge and free coffee. Like, it requires a place that people work that they go, yeah, I'm making a difference. I'm hitting results. I'm hitting targets that we're setting as a team, whatever that might be. So the performance has to be there. And I think that culture, thankfully, has shifted to be a bit more like what you and I would both describe, probably a bit more balanced versus just that fun kind of, it's got a, beer drinking culture to it. It's legit and real.
I think that's a great point. So I think about the '90s. In the '90s, I think, and again, I could be making stuff up here. I know I am, but the '90s, I think, were about process. And then you have the zeros, which were about scooters and ping pong tables and
Mhm.
beer. And then I think it was after that, which I kind of describe culture, it's not quite getting squishy. In fact, on the contrary, it was people like Vern and um, uh, um, who's the other okay, not OKRs, but Vern
So like
Harnish.
John, OKRs, well,
Anyway,
that was
but
John.
you have
Yeah,
these
yeah. Okay.
business models, right? You have these entrepreneur systems,
Yeah.
and um, and I think the systems now become a big part of culture too. So it's
Mhm.
kinda swinging back towards the process, but it incorporates the joy of work with the process of work, and I think that's where we're
Yeah,
at today, which is
I
cool.
agree.
I think you're right,
It's
the
balanced.
pendulum is
The
swinging.
pendulum swung. Yeah.
So again, take me to that point. What led to the changing of the name, the branding? Like, what was that thing? Or is it a marketing thing? I mean, obviously 1-800-GOT-JUNK's a pretty good marketing tactic.
Mhm. I think we developed a great name out of a problem, seeing that the word rubbish is very Canadian or British. And every time I'd mention to my family from the United States that my company was the Rubbish Boys, they'd often say Rubbage Boys. They'd get the name wrong. They didn't know how to spell it. I'm like, this is a problem. If I'm going to expand into the US, which was on my mind, I better look at changing the name. So we were the Rubbish Boys. Our phone number was 738 Junk. It was a local phone number. And I knew that we couldn't just get local phone numbers in every single city that ended with the word junk. That was going to be complicated. So the idea was if we were to go to the US, if we were to get a phone number down there, what would it look like? Well, how about a toll free number, kind of like a 1-800 Flowers or a 1-800 Go FedEx? And we came up with this concept based on the Got Milk campaign, the Dairy Board advertising campaign in the 90s. Let's take junk and put that in a phone number. What would it be? 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Now, the easy part's coming up with the name. The hard part's getting the phone number, because once an 800 number is gone, it's gone. And there was the Department of Transportation in Idaho. Took me 60 phone calls to track down who owned the phone number and how I was going to get this. And it turned out that the guy in the phone room, running the phone room, Michael, at the Department of Transportation, said, I don't know why you keep calling me and why you want this working number of ours so badly, but we don't use it that much. Sounds more important to you. He gave me the AT&T forms. I signed off and boom, done. I called him up a couple of days later to thank him and just say, what can I do for you? He was no longer with the company. So I had no idea what happened to Michael.
My God,
And I
it
have not been
sounds
able to
like
find him since,
it
but
sounds like a
we've got
Christmas
the number.
miracle. Wonder if Michael was an angel, right? Like, wasn't that what
He could
happened
have
to
been.
Clarence? Clarence was an angel. Maybe Michael's, and you remember his name to this point. I mean, that's
I
amazing.
sure do.
So I think at a certain point, you hitched up with Cameron Herold, who's also been on the podcast actually a couple times here, who became your COO.
Mm.
Where in the process did he join the team?
Yeah, so Cameron and I were in the same forum together through EO for years. He was in a bartering business. He was just in the process of leaving that. I was explaining some of my problems I was having trying to grow and figure out the model. And he said, oh, I'd never work for you. And I said, well, why don't you consult? You're in between gigs right now. So he came up with a reasonable hourly wage and came in, and that 30-day contract turned into 7 years. He helped me get from 2 million in revenue to 106 million in revenue over 7 years, I think, actually.
Yeah.
We had a blast together. I mean, Cameron and I are still friends, even though he always loves to tell everybody that I fired him. But it was one of those two at the top, both being really ADHD, the fire ready aim types. It worked at up to 50 million, maybe 75 million. Then we started to see cracks in the foundation and had to make a change. But so grateful for what Cameron did to get us to that first massive milestone of 100 million. And it was exactly what the business needed at that time. Because when I found my next implementer, who Eric Church, it's been 14 years and he's fantastic. In fact, him and Cameron knew each other from a previous life. And Eric Church is the rigor and the discipline that we needed at that next level to go from 100 million to a billion. He couldn't have done Cameron's job, and Cameron couldn't have done his job. And so, as a leader, sometimes we have to recognize the different stages of growth and make sure we've got the right people matched for the right seats on the bus, including ourselves. As entrepreneurs, I mean, how many EOers sell their business because they can't do it anymore? They don't know how. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to find someone to help me take it next level.
So it's interesting you brought up both you and Cameron kind of being the ADD leaders. When you were
Yeah.
describing your upbringing, I equated it very much to how Cameron describes his upbringing. I mean, he's very, very vocal about his ADD, and it's so I can understand um, that overlap in the personalities. I think
Mm,
the best partners, especially when you're looking at an integrator and a visionary, are yin and yang, like
mhm.
bridges for that matter. Um, was he a part of the decision to go to 1-800 Got Junk, or did he come in after that? When did he
He
join?
came in after. He came in after. So we had come up with the name 1-800 Got Junk. And then it was my operations manager, Paul Guy, who was from Toronto, who took the first franchise by driving a truck from Vancouver to Toronto and opening the first business. And I actually found Paul Guy because of I found Paul Guy because of Cameron Herold. They were both a part of College Pro Painters, these big painting companies that existed back in the day where university students would earn a buck while getting a business education. And Cameron knew Paul and introduced me. And so Cameron was helping me before he actually ended up being employed with us. And he really was, Cameron, a remarkable part of our story. And it's exciting when you find those right fits, even when a relationship has to end, not a friendship, but a business relationship where you've got to part ways. Um, Cameron knows it was right. And Cameron's written 6 books, maybe more now. Like he's on the speaking circuit like crazy and he's doing all this coaching. And so it probably worked out for the best for both of us moving forward. But wow, what a ride.
Now the franchise model, it sounds like you kinda stumbled into it when one of your guys wanted to move somewhere else. Is that accurate, or was this by design?
No, no, it was by design. So I really liked the franchise model, starting with Ray Kroc, who built McDonald's, of course. And I just thought, I want someone to have skin in the game. I don't want to do this alone. I love surrounding myself with great people who share a similar common passion towards building something special. And while I've never been the biggest McDonald's fan in terms of food, their business format franchise model led the way and really popularized what business ownership could look like. When people talk about the American dream, it isn't just starting your own business from scratch. There's also the model of buying an existing model and being the local entrepreneur behind that success story. So I wanted to be like McDonald's, and we got out there and started to create a program. But where I ran into blocks was in the very beginning, just pre Cameron coming on board. People said, "Why would anyone go out and buy a junk truck? Like, why wouldn't they just do it themselves? What are you bringing to the table?" And they were right to have that concern, but we solved that with 1-800 Got Junk, a central phone number, the marketing and branding under one umbrella where we would do all the booking and dispatch from our call center. And we've been able to parlay that into a model that's worked incredibly well, as you and I have been talking about.
So I know Cameron Herold wrote a book called The Painted Picture. Now, tell me if this is related, but at one point you set 3 goals for yourself, and I'm a little lost on the timeline. I don't know when this was exactly.
Sure.
But you said you wanted to be in North America's top 30 markets, you wanted to hit 100,000,000, and you wanted to be on Oprah.
Mm.
Uh, when did you set those goals?
September 17th, 1998.
Okay,
So
so this is
I actually
right around the period in which you transitioned to Got Junk.
correct.
Mm,
So it was just before that. We were still the Rubbish Boys. Cameron wrote a book actually called Vivid Vision.
thank you. Thank you,
So
yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
so I came up with a concept, the painted picture. I taught Cameron when he came in, and it's an interesting story. But first of all, I'll share with you. So what the painted picture was for me was I joined EO in '96. By '97, '98, I was going, gee, I've only built $1 million business. I'm surrounded by people that have 10 and $100 million businesses. What am I doing here in junk removal? So I went to a little retreat location. My parents had a summer cottage on the water. And I went out and took out a sheet of paper, and EO inspired me to just go to a quiet place and think. And I wrote out what the future possibilities could look like for 1-800 Got Junk. I said we'd be in the top 30 metros in North America. We'd be the FedEx and junk removal. We'd be in the uh, on the Oprah Winfrey Show, all these crazy ideas. And I said it at a time 5 years into the future, something I could see in my brain of what it would look, feel, and how we'd act at that point in the future. And when I read this one-page double-sided document afterwards, I'm like, wow, I can see this. And I started sharing it with everybody around me, including when Cameron Herold joined. I said, this is where we're going. And he said, I want to be a part of that. So years later, 2003, top 30 metros. We were on the Oprah Winfrey Show. We were the FedEx to junk removal with clean, shiny trucks and friendly uniformed drivers. And Cameron was a big part of that story, of course. But partway in between there, Cameron said, yeah, Brian's the vision guy. I can't think in visions. And he used to say that all the time. He said, I'm the executor. I'm the guy reverse engineering what Brian sees. I said, don't sell yourself short. You can see the picture too. No, 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 can't do that. So I said, if you were to go anywhere on vacation tomorrow, where would you go? Money's not an object. Who are you with? What does it sound like, feel like, look like? What drink is in your hand? He gave me the entire detail of this tropical dream paradise vacation. He knew where he'd go. He knew what it would look and feel like. I said, all you do is use that same imagination towards a business and imagine what you see for your future. And so something clicked. And, I had always said I'd write a book, but I didn't have time. He did. And he wrote the book Vivid Vision, which is a great book. And so creating a painted picture, if you believe in that future, that you have a destination you're going towards, it isn't necessarily how to get there, it's that you believe you're going to get there. Then you start figuring out all the hows, and you bring in the right people to help fill those gaps.
You skimmed over something rather quickly, and which is amazing because like 30 markets, 100 million. In being an entrepreneur, I can imagine those things. The one thing that you skimmed over pretty quickly that I can't really imagine, how the heck did you get on Oprah Winfrey?
It was a mini vision of ours. So something Cameron was a part of was we had this big empty wall in our office. The junction is what we called it. We had this big empty wall. I'm like, well, what do we do with that wall? And I said, let's make it the Can You Imagine wall. Let's inspire people to dream big and come up with incredible visions. So I put up a big decal on the wall, vinyl decal, Can You Imagine? And below it, being featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, because that was a goal in the painted picture that I knew I wanted to see happen. Cameron put up, can you imagine us being featured in a Harvard Business School case study? And that one also happened. We started imagining these big things and engaged our people in visions bigger than any individual. And so the Oprah Winfrey one, we hired somebody, Tyler Wright, who was a PR hire, 24, zero experience on PR, but he had a personality and he knew how to tell stories. We paid him to come in and learn our story and tell it to others. And one day he's in our open office environment. He's wearing a blue wig because that's what he used to do when he'd pitch. And he stands up and he goes, we did it. We did it. After pitching and pitching and pitching for over a year, he landed the mother of all media hits, Oprah Winfrey. And they said, yes, let's get you guys out here. Let's get you to LA. They were doing a story about a hoarder who had all this junk and it was interfering with their life. And they wanted us to come clean it up. And well, we didn't have any trucks in Los Angeles. And I'm like, Tyler, you said yes to this. And he goes, yeah, of course. We're going to figure it out. Well, when do they want us there? Tomorrow. What are we going to do? So we put our heads together and we called San Francisco, our franchise there, and said, you guys need to get 2 trucks to Los Angeles tomorrow. And they're like, for what? Oprah Winfrey. Done. Phones hung up. They hop in the trucks and off everyone went. And we worked together to create some magic that we'll never forget.
Brian, you're a great storyteller. Like, you really are. Like, and I know these are stories you've told many times, but which makes a great storyteller too. But you really do have a gift of being able to tell a story all the way down to knowing when to end the story. Like, really, it's something I've noticed in the past
Oh,
45.
thank you.
Really,
That means a lot. I get better. I get better for sure. Didn't start that way.
was that the beginning? So you were on the show Hoarders, or Got Junk was on Hoarders for
Mhm.
many years. Was that the beginning of Got Junk's relationship with the show?
That had nothing to do with it. This was years later. Anya and our PR team reached out to Hoarders and said, I've seen this show and we need to get on that. And she picked up the phone, followed the same formula, and pestered them until they said yes. And then
Amazing.
we ended up on the show. But the best part, Dave, it ran for 7 seasons and we were actually written into the script. So not only this wasn't us paying them to be on the show. Our truck was written into a script. Where's 1-800 got junk? When are they going to show up? And they paid us to haul away all that junk over the years. So it was an absolute dream business partnership for us. And if you imagine it, you just never know. These big things might actually come true. And that's where all the great people I've gotten to work with, whether it's Cameron or Eric Church, Simon Sinek, we get people out there that they believe in something that you see and they want to be a part of it. And then you go to just find a way to somehow make it happen.
Well, I didn't know you worked with Simon Sinek. What was your work with him?
Simon Sinek read an article about Cameron and I in Fortune magazine. And he goes, I don't know what you guys are building, what you guys are smoking, but I want to be a part of it. And before Simon was famous, he had an ad agency, a small one, and he flew out on his own dime to see us and figure out how he could help us. And he became a part of our marketing. He was on our board and he did some fantastic things that, again, made such a difference and an impact to us that we got lucky. We connected with great people who see the magic we see, and it was a pretty special time.
That's amazing. So you something I've been struggling with is I've had a couple software companies, and there's a lot of software that, gets up to 100 million, a billion, and of course, we all know about the Magnificent 7. I think it's Magnificent 7, maybe it's 10, Magnificent 10. Anyway, the Nasdaq, but you have
Sure.
these many, almost trillion-dollar companies at this point. Um, but I always like, my vision goes to about 10 million. I'm like, yeah, but at that point, everything just gets so fuzzy.
Mhm.
Did you see 1-800, well, even before that, did you see, the Rubbish Boys as being a billion-dollar company? I mean, at what
Not a
point were you
chance.
like,
Yeah.
"Thank God, maybe we're a billion-dollar company here?"
I'd liken it to an analogy of if you can imagine, most people at some point in their life have done some hiking, but you're out climbing a hill and you can't really see above the peak. But when you get over one side and you see, oh, there's another peak off in the distance, then you go climb that one and it's like, whoa, there's another mountain behind. And I think vision has been the same thing for me.
Yeah.
Wow, the vision is to pay for college. Done. Now the vision is to build a household brand in Vancouver under the Rubbish Boys. Okay, done. Now the vision's to build something across Canada and the US. Boom. And so the vision grows. I think most entrepreneurs I've ever studied, they didn't set out to change the world in the biggest way possible from day one. They needed to earn some confidence. They needed to get a track record. They needed to figure out what the potential and possibilities really were.
So it's an iterative process, is what I'm hearing you say. So but
So
to ask the question again, very specifically, when do you think it first crossed your mind, if there was a time where you're like, "Man, I think we might have a billion-dollar company here."
yeah, I think it crossed my mind in the sort of early 2000s, around that point when we were really getting to 100 million or getting close, maybe 2004 or 5. But I don't know if I really understood what a company 10 times the size of $100 million company really looks like. It matures. You've got a level of team and discipline that you need in place to get to run at that level. I mean, there's so many people in my company that I don't even have a clue work for us, with us, what they do. Um, I'll never visit every single franchise that we started. I couldn't possibly. So it gets to a size and a scale where I'm like, I play a tiny, tiny little role in this big business. Um, I'm so disconnected from so many things because that's what happens. I met Reed Hastings, one of the co-founders of Netflix. I was at a TED conference and I bumped into him. I'm like, man, you're Reed Hastings. I said, can I ask you a question? We were on a coffee break. He said, of course. I said, what's the number one thing you've learned in building a $1 billion plus business? And he's like, knowing when to let go, when to get out of your own way. I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. What's an example?" He said, I didn't know we had expanded to China until I heard in the press we were in China. And I'm like, but you're the CEO. How's that possible? He goes, I can't keep my hands on my fingers on everything. He goes, if you do, you're not going to get to that we expanded to China level. And that's always stuck with me.
We've got just a couple more minutes. I know you have a hard stop, and I want to be respect you. And I'll see you think it's a pop quiz. What is the weirdest thing you ever hauled away or found? And part of gut junk. And I warn you, I know the answer. I'm just this. That's why I'm calling it a pop.
There's a lot of crazy things, but I'd say the craziest find is cash. We found $400,000 cash
That's
under
it.
the floorboards
Ding,
at
ding,
someone's
ding.
home. Yeah, there you go. $5.3 million when it was evaluated. It was 1932 circa circulation bills, and it was $5.3 million. And we didn't get to keep it, of course. We got a nice tip though.
And it's a mystery still to this day. You know, but the whole
Nobody knows. Nobody knows why that money was hidden. Something to do with some money laundering scheme in the back in the early 20s, probably.
so
30s.
I have two more rapid fire questions here. One is yours, Dods. What did you ever tell him back as an adult what
I
he
did.
meant to you?
I
You
did.
know?
I did. I wrote about him in my book. He's in WTF. I wrote a chapter on him and the difference it made him believing in me. And then I sent him a copy of the book. And I wasn't even sure I had the right Mr. Dodds. There were a few of them. I think I even sent out a few books to other Mr. Dodds. And he wrote me a beautiful handwritten letter back. And he said, I always knew, he goes, you don't remember every student, but he goes, I remembered you and always knew you'd become something because I really
That's
did believe. And I'm like, your words, he was in his 80s
yeah.
when he wrote the letter back. And he goes, my memory's a little slow these days and I can't piece it all together. But he goes, I remember there was something special about you. And I said, teachers need to tell people that more. And he was a great man.
That's
He still is a great man. Yeah.
all right. Now personal. Let's make it about me, Brian. I have, unlike you, I have so much junk in my house. What do you suggest? What do I do?
Well, you probably pick up the phone and call 1-800-GOT-JUNK, or you send me an email when we're done and we help you figure it out. I mean, I think the whole world has way too much stuff. We are in a collective mode of more stuff is better, especially North Americans.
Especially in the
And we
U.S.
buy and buy exactly. And Amazon, I mean, it makes it so easy to one click, boom, 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 buy all this shit that you'll never use. And yeah, so I can help. You made it a ton of fun, and I've done hundreds of podcasts, and so often you get asked the same questions. Not from you, Dave. It was amazing.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.